we go. Great showing from our board members. So thank you. And with that, maybe just 3 seconds of silence in honor of Congressman Lewis.
Thank you, everyone. Now, the briefing goals and objectives today is to outline a roadmap to supplier diversity for council members and stakeholders. On this briefing today, we have supplier diversity and supply chain professionals who are anxious to learn how we can leverage supplier diversity to generate racial equity. To that end, we have guest presenters and our facilitator, Reggie Williams. If you know Reggie Williams, then you know he originally coined the phrase supplier diversity back in the 80s, and he has worked with more than half of the Fortune 500 in making supplier diversity and leveraging supplier diversity to support their brand and to support the consumers who end up using the products and services provided. So as an expert, Reggie will facilitate today's briefing, and he is joined by guest speakers, Chris Collette, Senior Vice President, Corporate Services at UnitedHealth Group, and UHG is the largest healthcare insurer in the United States. Hector Martinez, hello again, Hector. He's Vice President, Supplier Diversity and Sustainability at US Bank. The bank is recognized as one of the world's most admired companies by Fortune magazine. John Taylor, Director, Supplier Diversity at Medtronic and Board Chairman of the North Central MSDC. Medtronic is the largest supplier of ventilators as well as other medical devices globally with operations in 150 countries. And Sharon Patterson, President and CEO of the Billion Dollar Roundtable. So the BDR, as it's known, is made up of 28 of the most highly acclaimed corporations in supplier diversity. They're a benchmark organization leading breakthrough initiatives in supplier diversity, having achieved at least $1 billion in spend with minorities and women-owned businesses. I would like to welcome our guest speakers and our facilitator, Reggie Williams. Thank you. Reggie?
Thank you so much. Here we are. Everybody and his brother suddenly got religion. But look what it took for something to happen. We have to ask ourselves as advocates, what's our role? What we're going to do? How are we going to really make a change? How are we going to sustain the progress that we've made? Many of you don't know what this means, but we want to lay out a path forward so that you can come along with us. As you know, this council and its stakeholders enjoy a rich history of building bridges to opportunities. But these days have been painful and even illuminating for many of us. The horrific and chilling experience that we all witnessed has changed our lives forever. Took me a couple of weeks just to get through one full night's sleep. And we simply can't perpetuate the myth that everything is okay, because it's not. But we just can't continue doing what we've been doing, or we'll continue getting what we've been getting. This is bigger than anything you and I have imagined. It's a perfect storm. While everybody in America is now facing COVID-19, Black people are facing COVID plus systemic racism. But as recent protests show us, we need everybody to step up their commitment so that we can make a true cultural transformation. And if you've looked at what's happening, everybody is. We are looking at a multicultural quilt of people coming forward saying enough is enough. And that is why the community of supplier diversity advocates, senior executives in the C-suite, supplier diversity managers, MBEs, and the local councils, the NCMSDC councils. Many of you don't know this. I'm the 30th member to join NCMSDC when it was forming. I'm one of the founding members. That was 10 years before we hired Harriet Michelle. So I've seen the growth that's possible, but it's only possible when you have everyone pulling with us. I want you to feel that you have something to contribute, that you belong, that you're a part of the solution. We can't be sitting on the sidelines while this change simply rolls over America and the globe. And we simply can't be silent any longer if we want to be the change that we hope to see. We're bound together as advocates of an important mission to ensure economic opportunity. And our work is even more important today because of these conditions. If we're complicit or we punt the ball, we simply perpetuate the problem, taking no part in creating the change that we know needs to happen. No, supplier diversity isn't there yet either. It isn't. The painful and horrific events that we have witnessed right here in Minneapolis continue today across the entire country. So now there's a real sense of urgency for those of us who call ourselves advocates of supplier diversity. We need to review what we're doing to be sure that it doesn't conflict with our mission and our values. Our eye needs to be centered on the moral purpose that drives supplier diversity in the first place, and that is to ensure competitive access for at-risk groups that have been marginalized as full participants in the procurement and contracting cycle. So what are we trying to achieve, Reggie? What's this briefing all about? We need a new experience model that demonstrates our resolve and commitment with substantive change, not rhetoric. I know corporations are giving out checks. They're making loans available. We need institutional change that will focus on our discipline called supply chain management. I'm a CPO. And what that means is, I know we must have the protocols and the systems that will support this as a part of the total mission. Number one, we need to look at our processes, our protocols, and our procedures that drive competitive access to ensure that we are sustaining growth, particularly in those groups that are most underutilized. Number two, we know the primary job of the council is to inspire others by bringing us together as stakeholders. How are we helping in that cause? There are too many companies where supplier diversity is an island and we have not reached out internally. Number three, COVID-19 in the quest for racial justice has taught us, at the very least, that it's time to pivot in a new direction. We must become intentional and focused on the groups that are most at risk. The most underutilized group in the supply pool among minorities are Native Americans. Following that, African American male-owned companies are not faring well. Let's ask ourselves, what are we doing to remove the barriers to entry? How are we going to sustain the opportunities that we have? What's our end game, and how do we get everybody on board? At the end of the day, George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, was shocking. I'm just now beginning to sleep through an entire night. And for many, it removed the blinders of unknowing, the blinders of indifference, and even the blinders of, that's not my issue. And if you're Black, and I've been Black my whole life, it's not just heart-wrenching, it shook us to our core and created a real world view that is undeniable. We ain't there yet. So let's seize the momentum. Let's not lapse into the back burner. Let's focus on what we can do within our organizations to make lasting change. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Reggie. So let's talk about the road to racial equity.
Supplier diversity is reached through a two-pronged fork. And we constantly have meetings. We just had a program managers meeting, NMSDC. But we focused on the wrong side of the wrong prong of the fork. Organizational, that's the side where you build an effective and cohesive strategy that prioritizes a mission. That means nothing without the other prong, which is behavioral, getting people to behave differently. And the way you do that, you must maximize the sense of team, not by finger pointing and calling people racist, by having them join in as part of the solution. This intentional consensus building and clarification of roles gets everybody pulling in the same direction. That is the road to racial equity with regards to supplier diversity. The history of supplier diversity is important to note. The purchasing power of minorities and women represents the fastest growing market segment of the economy. African Americans are the second most underutilized vendor group. African American small businesses have declined in spend. Growth in the marketplace is fueled by minority and women purchasing power. That means supplier diversity is an imperative for every company that is now a participant in this webinar. So it's essential as part of our growth strategy. These are the fundamentals of the culture change that we're trying to achieve. We need to evaluate the internal culture, and instead of just saying, oh, we're doing well, we need to take a look at the internal culture to confirm that what we're doing supports our mission and our focus. We need to embed supplier diversity into the DNA so that it becomes routine. We need to position supplier diversity as a competitive advantage to drive brand value. And we need to ramp up our engagement with at-risk suppliers across all business units. And last but not least, we must hold the team accountable for results, not just rhetoric.
Well, this is a great overview. Thank you, Reggie. Reggie has asked that these four speakers, four leaders in supplier diversity, join us with insights into how their companies help to grow supplier diversity. So I'd like to call for Chris Collette. Do you have any comments? Or John Taylor or Sharon Patterson, and of course, Hector.
Let's start with Chris. I need everybody to know this is a guy, when he says something, when I worked with him and he was the chief procurement officer for Delta Airlines, our numbers were down. Nobody knew that this was a part of the mission. He immediately required that everybody on the team be trained. He immediately required that we include supplier diversity as a core element of generating best value. His focus has always been generating customer value. Well, if supplier diversity is not a part of generating customer value, it has no value. So I asked Chris to just speak with us today.
I think he's on mute.
No, he's not.
He's a Skype user.
Yeah, it's I'm sorry, Chris, but it shows that you're not muted, but yet we can't hear you. So I'm wondering if the audio problem is there on the other end.
Let's go directly to Hector so we don't
Can
lose
we
time.
go back? Yeah. Hector, are you still with us?
I am. So when I think about being able to grow the stakeholder base or the supplier base, I immediately look at where are the opportunities to onboard diverse suppliers. And, you know, quite frankly, from my standpoint, it doesn't make a difference to me whether it's a tier 1 relationship or tier 2, because at the end of the day, the money is green, whether it comes from US Bank or from one of our vendors. So number one is I look at categories where we find and see opportunities that are immediate. Obviously, like in this particular circumstance, and I believe that Target is doing a really nice job of this as well, is the rebuilding and the reconstruction of their stores that were damaged on Lake Street and in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and utilizing diverse vendors to rebuild those communities, hopefully from the community. But as you said, Reggie, it's very difficult to find suppliers in those particular areas. So we're really looking very hard and trying different ways to become more innovative in our approach to working with diverse suppliers. Another item that I will bring up is obviously is in the digital space and IT. We find that within those particular areas, now our bank does not have a policy per se that mandates supplier diversity or even procurement. So we have a very unique program in that regard, but nonetheless, we continue to show great performance in our spend numbers and our numbers of diverse suppliers. And so the way that we continue to grow that number is by finding internal business units and business lines that have the most opportunity. And that is everything from, you know, budget as well as from a contract standpoint. So understanding how your organization purchases goods and services is something that we've become very good at, and making sure that we have strong alliances from top down. So that's everybody from our CEO down one level to the managing committee member, and then everything on down that cascades throughout the organization. So those are some ways that we've been able to leverage our executives, getting other teams involved, and making sure that you know, we as professionals in supplier diversity are well versed in the way that the procurement operations and processes work. I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Hector. Reggie, I think that we have Chris now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great.
Did you hear my intro?
Yes, I did.
So you know I can't continue.
I'm still using the tissue. Thanks, Reggie. I appreciate the intro. Let me tell you, first of all, I'll give you a feel for our mission and values here. We have over 325,000 employees now, men and women, driven by a single mantra. You'll see this on the wall in our buildings. You'll see it everywhere you turn the corner, which is our mission is to help people live healthier lives and make the healthcare system work better for everyone. And next to that, you'll see our values, which are integrity, compassion, relationship, innovation, and performance. And we have a fundamental belief that our potential is made stronger by inclusion of diverse, skilled, both workforce and supply base. So that's where our values and supplier diversity blend together. Now I can tell you all the things that you know, a lot of you know, and Reggie knows that our program here at UHG looks a lot like the one at Delta Airlines, and it's no mistake. But I think the key word, if there's one word in my mind, it's opportunity. And an opportunity, you know, and meaning true opportunity. And in sort of three levels. One is the opportunity to bid, and giving the supplier the diverse supplier the opportunity to truly understand the requirements, perhaps give them a little coaching and counseling through the process so they get a fair shot, and then allow them to compete against the best bid. Secondly, I think that we have an opportunity to allow them to compete more fairly. And what I mean by that is, as you can imagine, many of your companies, our company, I would tell you it's a rare business deal that's less than double-digit millions in this business. And therefore, anytime most of your diverse suppliers, as you know, start small, and it's a bit of David versus Goliath, and simply put, on an apples-to-apples basis, they may not win. But I'm a huge believer in the way to get ahead with supplier diversity is plant some roots, parse out some portion of the opportunity, and give the supplier a chance to perform, demonstrate their performance, and build on their success. We have one example of that in our network, HCDI, Healthcare Dynamics International. And in short, what they do is they help us reach out, they help us match up our clinically and culturally competent care with the individuals that need the care. It's a minority and women-owned business. They apply the appropriate engagement strategies to get to our hardest members that are typically difficult to get with, and therefore help them improve their care. That business has, since we began doing business with them a couple of years ago, has increased by 400%. It's still a relatively small number, but a chance to continue to, like I said, develop deep roots and continue to grow further would be the opportunity. Lastly, I would say that I think when we give someone the opportunity, and in fact they do not win the bid, I think it's incumbent upon us to give them some education, some counseling, some coaching in terms of how they may do better in the future, and how they may do better, not just with us, but with the next bid opportunity they have that may not be us at all. You know, I could go on about sort of how we also connect to, you know, outside of supplier diversity itself. We've done a number of things as a company and contributed a fair amount of money to the George's family itself to help with their education, to help rebuild parts of Minneapolis that quite honestly look a bit like a war zone. And lastly, to just invest in the community in terms of food and other necessities. You know, we've had some real success here at UHG. I would say we've taken a program that was sort of, I would describe it 5 years ago, structured properly, but really needed some oomph behind it. And so we've been really pushing hard, and I would say moving down up the maturity curve in terms of where we are with our supplier diversity capabilities, and have established outreach to the business organizations that we support. We have connectivity with them. We have representation on advisory councils, both within our own employee group and outside in the various and many departments. And this is a complicated business. It's many businesses within businesses. But I think we've done all the right things. I won't bore you by going through our sort of accolades in terms of what we've accomplished, because you know what they are, and we've been catching up the last few years, and I think we're catching up, gaining a lot of steam, and proud of the fact that we're moving ahead pretty strongly. The last thing I'll share with you is, you know, we could talk about, as I said, talk about the money that UHG has invested and the time and volunteer hours it's invested in many programs around the state and the city. But the thing I'm most proud of as an organization, my own organization, is we've expanded this conversation beyond our supplier diversity team and certainly beyond our procurement group. And I have a weekly session. It's called Coffee with Chris, kind of corny, but as we've all been working from home, it's our one means of connecting and staying connected with each other. See, and I got the cup to prove it. Got my own brand. I think what I'm most proud of is we've had three sessions in a row now where we've talked about the events that have taken place just miles down the road from us here. And many of my employees, many of our employees live in the neighborhoods where this was happening, you know, both black and white, and all different, many races. And we've kept the conversation going. Quite honestly, we don't know exactly where we're going next. We're going where the conversation takes us. The next thing we're going to do is train our people on unconscious bias. But the thing that I'm most proud of and encouraged by is when we ask for volunteers to help sort of sort this out. In my view, it wasn't levels of the organization that mattered. It was people to people, human to human. And we readily got hands up in a hurry in terms of people that want to get involved in the discussion that, you know, may have nothing to do. They work in our real estate departments, so they work in our business continuity planning departments, et cetera, and have nothing to do with supplier diversity on a day-to-day basis, but they want to be part of the process.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. That's a great insight, and it's good to know how it's impacting you there and the changes that are being made. I want to move on to another guest presenter, but I wanted to sort of recap what we're looking at in terms of growing the stakeholder base. To summarize, Hector talked about tier 2 opportunities and really looking at those in terms of building, you know, your supplier diversity spend, letting it go up, and looking at tier 1 contractors or vendors who have the tier 2 base that you're after to get your numbers up and to really engage. Chris talked about the opportunity and I think mentoring. Now, in terms of some of the things that Chris relayed, a lot of that was what went back to what you were saying, Reggie, where you're embedding supplier diversity in the DNA of the company across the enterprise. So
that's where he got it from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm wondering if John or Sharon would like to give us some insights into how they're growing the stakeholder base in their companies.
Sure, Allison, I can provide a little bit of context around that.
Great, thank you.
Wanted to thank you as well as Reggie for bringing this together. It warms my heart to be able to see everyone and at least via our electronic meetings. But I've prepared a couple of comments.
Okay, excuse me, John. John, I'm so sorry, but it seems like your volume's going down a little bit. Can you raise it up or?
Yes, let me try to do that. Is this any better, Allison?
Yeah, it's a little better. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Please continue.
So at Medtronic, we believe certainly diversity drives better, and this includes creating a diverse supply chain, one that delivers quality, also benefiting the patients.
We're losing him.
That we serve and the broader communities in which we operate. Further, we gain that competitive advantage that has been spoken about quite a bit during our conversation. We get that gain that competitive advantage through a lot of product innovation as well as flexibility that's delivered by a diverse supply base. At Medtronic, we're committed to building a diverse supply chain and developing a lot of those opportunities for diverse suppliers. This long-standing commitment, it has generated innovations that have enhanced some of our patients' lives and our operations. As such, we plan to increase the inclusion of diverse suppliers in our RFPs for new business opportunities. Last year, for the last several years, that's been at 50%. This year, we're going to 75% for our fiscal year. We're also increasing our overall spend with diverse suppliers by 5% year over year. We just finished our FY20 numbers, and they were double digit. They came in at 12.9%. So in addition to some of these focus areas, our business unit sourcing teams have very specific goals with stratification of our top diverse suppliers, as well as tier 2 inclusion. So I think that, Reggie, this kind of goes back to a little bit of what you were talking about in terms of changing the behaviors.
Yes.
We're looking to change those behaviors. We want to quantify them. So it is not something that's just anecdotal. So our establishment of some of these aggressive goals for diverse procurement, and I purposely sometimes use that term, diverse procurement or procurement, as opposed to the spend Because what do we hear consistently from our CPOs? That we've got to reduce, we've got to cut down on our spend. So I try to begin to shape it a little differently. So we're talking about diverse procurement. So we utilize with these aggressive goals. We track them. We track our accomplishments. We communicate those results at our quarterly supplier diversity steering committee meetings. We believe this helps drive and demonstrate the responsibility and the accountability. So this is recognized throughout Medtronic, not simply just our global supply management or our procurement organization. And our supplier tracking system allows us to report that spend by business unit, by commodity, by geographical area, ethnicity, gender, as well as cost reduction. Because it's important to be able to understand what our numbers are. It's important to be able to understand what our numbers are. I see a question that's come in. What is the 75% in terms of our diverse, in terms of our DIR, our diverse inclusion rate? Every RFP, 75% of those RFPs have to have a diverse supplier that's in that, or it doesn't go forward. Just as you would with your workforce. If you want a diverse workforce, you're going to want to make sure that you have a diverse slate of candidates. We're looking at the same thing when we're looking at our RFPs. So last year that was at 50%. Most of our business units were far and above that. So this year we raised that to 75%. So thank you for the question.
Excellent.
That's
Our
great. Thank you.
utilization that also helps us share that, and also helps us share those suppliers with other business units. We have 4 major business units. Sometimes a supplier may feel as if they're siloed within one area. We want to make sure that we're sharing the capabilities of that supplier throughout our business units. So when we have these quarterly meetings and we begin to communicate amongst ourselves, changing that behavior you're talking about, Reggie, sharing information among ourselves allows that particular supplier to have at least an opportunity in other areas. So those supply performance goals, especially that year-over-year percentage, are signed off by the business unit leaders. So it is not, it's not a goal, it's not an aspiration that is not tied directly, and I say that again, not tied directly back to that business unit leader. They have to sign off on that, and they have to be accountable for that. And we report those metrics every quarter during those steering committee meetings. Our supply diversity metrics are, again, and those are reviewed by our senior leadership. So those scorecards, that year-over-year growth, that DIR or that diverse inclusion rate, the stratification, and what I mean by the stratification is, well, we've all been in the situation where, oh, the RFP is going out tomorrow. Oh, but we don't have a diverse supplier. 80% of our top diverse suppliers have to be stratified, which means that they have to be ready to go in any RFP at a moment's notice. So we want to get rid of the scenario of, well, we don't have one. Well, it is your job to be able to stratify those suppliers. It is your job to be able to tell the supply diversity team what's in the pipeline. Because when we know what's in the pipeline, I can communicate with all of you on this call. Do you know of a specific supplier that does X, Y, Z? So if we have that information ahead of time, we can react appropriately. So I would say in closing, focusing on these 4 goals helps to, and I hate to belabor the point, but it helps drive the behaviors that we expect to see from our procurement teams.
Great.
So thanks.
Oh, thank you very much, John. Some people noted that they could not hear you, although many said they could hear you fine. So I want to remind everyone we're going to have a recording of this session available along with the handouts, and we'll make sure that we get that to everyone. I'll work with Heather and Reggie on that.
Thank you.
Sharon Patterson is with us today, and I'd like to know if she'd like to share some insights about growing the stakeholder base.
Yes.
Can I just say, make a statement? I said this to Sharon on the phone. Her organization, listen to me, everyone. Nobody saw this coming. BDR has become the benchmark organization. It is the dream team of supplier diversity. Many of the things she's going to share with you, everybody can apply. But the principles, how do we deal with systemic racism? Embedding it in the DNA the way they do is the real difference. I just had to say that. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, Reggie, I hope everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes.
Good. Thank you so much. And thank you for supporting the Billion Dollar Roundtable. We got established in 2001, and you know, this has been a growth in process. And what it says today is that our work is not done. None of us have finished the job. And so our vision is to lead, influence, and shape supplier diversity globally. And the vision is to drive supplier diversity excellence through best practice sharing and thought leadership. And that's what we think that we've done with all of the best practices that we've gathered over the years. We have 28 members. That's, you would think that, well, gee, that's not a whole lot in today's measurements and efforts and everything, but 28 really is a lot. And we have to work very, very hard to make sure that 28 sustains the billion that they have achieved, and then even grow that beyond that piece. During this pandemic time, all of our members are having issues, as you can imagine. But the emphasis on supplier diversity has not decreased, it's actually increased. Just like you have seen among the panelists today, you're talking about all the extra effort that you're putting in place right now. And so with the 82 billion or so that our members achieved a couple of years ago, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in our measurement that's going on right now. We, believe it or not, we have applications from a couple of members, not a couple of members, but a couple of new companies who are saying that we think they're there, we think we're there. So we shall see how that works out. But as I've listened to the panelists today, I hear our best practices echoed throughout their conversation. We look at and have 12 best practices that we like to talk about. And I'm not going to attempt to talk about the 12 of them here, of course, but you can always get them in my shameless endorsement of our book, Billion Dollar Roundtable, Supplier Diversity Best Practices. But I've heard this team talk about commitment. I've heard this team talk about policy and sourcing opportunities, supplier development. You can't achieve supplier diversity without looking at all of those elements of procurement. If you don't have the commitment from the CEO, all these things that our panelists are talking about will go undone, or will just get minimal attention. Without the policy in place that coincides with everything else you do within the organization, supplier diversity, I don't care how urgent it is, it's not going to get done. It has to be a part of the foundation of what you do within that company. It has to be a part of the value system that the panelists have also talked about. So when you look at the best practices, and I hope that all of you will, go out and look at them. They're on our website, they're of course in our book, and of course they are supported by NCMSDC and your regional council. They're everywhere. You must embrace these best practices. Otherwise, your program is going to be lacking some kind of way. Our 28 members are totally engaged in supplier diversity. They have recommitted themselves, and even those companies who have been tempered by the travel industry have also recommitted itself. So embrace the best practices. Know that there are companies out there that are doing the same things that you are doing. Know that our work is not done. I mean, it's just, it almost feels like we're starting over again. So please stay the course, be supportive, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We appreciate our guest speakers being with us and providing these valuable insights. I'm going to recap John Taylor, just a quick recap. We talked about having the supplier database in the first, you can call on when it's time to send out RFPs. We talked about having a percentage of RFPs that are going to be presented at least to diverse suppliers. And of course, Sharon is talking about the best practices and taking it from the Billion Dollar Roundtable, the 28 corporations who achieve and maintain their $1 billion spend with diverse suppliers is a great resource as well to get your program moving. Reggie, we're going to move on to supplier diversity advocacy, and I have to say that we've gone over a bit, although it was very worth it to hear from our speakers. So it's going to be on you to move us along quickly from this point forward.
I'll move it quickly.
Great.
The essence of what we've heard thus far is this. We have a mission that can only be accomplished when we have a results-centered plan that we can execute. That results-centered plan must focus on the key issues that we're facing, and they're different in every industry. So we're going to lay out the basic fundamental underpinnings that everyone can take and work with. Then we'll go from there and talk about the details. Let's go.
All right.
First, it's advocacy. You need an influencer, an ambassador, champion, problem solver, support team. Here it is. All of this must come from your business units. You must engage the business units. Supplier diversity is only effective when others take ownership in it. This is exactly what JT and Chris have talked about. They can't be effective. JT doesn't buy anything. He's an influencer. He's an ambassador. He's a champion. He makes it happen. So we must find a way to engage the business units. I wrote down a few comments here. When you engage the business units, you will come up with shared purpose. With shared purpose, that leads to shared commitment. With shared commitment, you end up with shared results. So we will fail in our advocacy if we don't focus internally. I'm not saying that external advocacy is not important, but you first have to get your house in order. If we're building this basis, these underpinnings to affect change in systemic racism, it has to happen at home. Next.
All right, let's, actually, we're going to open this up now to the Q&A. And I wanted to comment that it seems that, some supplier diversity departments are a one-person department, right? And some of them, of course, are much bigger. So the advocacy roles that you were, the various roles of the advocate that you were just outlining, looks different in different departments, right? In different size departments. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we know that some are working with a different picture in their own companies. Now let's open this up to questions, and I see some great comments, but so far I don't have any questions.
Well, what you just raised was a question, Allison. What am I supposed to do, Reggie? I'm a one-man shop. I'm supposed to be responsible for supplier diversity. I have no authority, no budget. I want to move it along. I want to become that advocate. And here's how you do it. You will never succeed absent the help from others. They had a line in I think the city was Louisville. This was after Breonna was killed. And in the front of the line was a line of white women that were in front of the protesters in the back. And they sent a message when they formed that line. And the message was, it ain't about Black people only. You cannot be effective to generate sustainable change unless you have a champion, even if you don't have a relationship, a champion working with you in the business unit. So what do companies do? They form advisory councils. They form organizational task forces where there is a champion and an advocate embedded within each business unit that meets with you quarterly to generate business-wide consensus, enterprise-wide consensus about how to make, this can't be just you, Sally Smith, the supplier diversity team lead, who has no budget. It has to be about everyone. So it's a very good question.
Great. I do have a question here.
I'd like to chime into that and add that the affinity groups and other groups that are already organized within organizations will help that one person shop. So
Well,
that's my responsibility. Remember that.
well said.
Heather, we have another question here. I don't know if you want to answer this one or direct it. One person wrote, is it important to have a broader unconscious bias training corporate-wide so that procurement managers come to bids armed with a clear strategy of inclusion? Does anyone want to take that on, or Heather, you want to?
So I would start, I'll start and then someone can jump in. I would say that it's going to vary company by company, but I can't imagine any harm in having unconscious bias training to help create the inclusivity and to get more of your, just as Reggie was mentioning, you want to have an enterprise-wide consciousness. And to build that, I can't see any harm in doing that. I'll pause there to see if others have something to add.
The only thing that I would add to that would be, and it's been brought up several times. Not only is unconscious bias training helpful, but you have to bring supplier diversity back to the customer. You have to demonstrate the ROI. You have to demonstrate why it's important, and it's got to be tied back. It's got to be tied back. Got to be tied back to the money. Back to your customer base. And then once that is established, then that I think that really does then allow for that framework of having an unconscious bias training, not only within procurement, but certainly within the organization itself.
Great. Thank you. Thank you,
Well,
Heather.
I'm wondering if you maybe have any pointers as to some supplier diversity enterprise-wide training, or if anybody has rolled out a program like that. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yes, Hector, we're going to cover that. As a matter of fact, it is it's in the part 7, the last closing of this session.
Right. Here we are.
Toolkit of strategic options. These are the essentials. This is the gotta haves in order for you to succeed. Everybody's already talked about this. Executive sponsor. It's easy to say this, but if I'm Joe Blow sitting there and I haven't even met my executives, I'm 3 levels down. I have no relationship. It's even out of protocol for me to suggest that I should talk to them. How the heck do I get the ball started, Reggie? That is what the council is there for. Your council drives what is called peer-to-peer relationships. As a matter of fact, the most effective peer-to-peer relationships are from those who are members of the BDR, who have already done it. Even though you're not a member, you can reach out to the BDR, and one of their executives, when calling another executive, is a different, in fact, you will find even competitors calling competitors to say you ought to take a look at examining the value of supplier diversity as part of your supply chain strategy. I have had companies, I'll just give you the industry, the auto rental business. I've had competitor executives call a competitor executive, and it started the supplier diversity program. So that's number one. Number two,
Sorry,
strategic.
Reggie. Reggie, can I stop you there because we do have a relevant question. One person asked how we can sell the importance of shared commitment when executive management has historically viewed supplier diversity as a supply chain thing. And I think this is kind of close to what you're answering now.
Say again, one more time.
How can we sell the importance of shared commitment when executive management has historically viewed supplier diversity as a supply chain thing?
Oh, it's go supplier, supply chain handles that. We got nothing to do with that.
Right.
Let me tell you what happened with Chris when at Delta. He had me develop a policy that was company-wide, that said to legal, that said to marketing, that you have a responsibility and we're going to gauge your performance in supplier diversity. We developed a policy company-wide for Delta so that it wasn't just supplier diversity. So with that, there was an accountability process built into every head of every business unit. So they not only did have to pay attention, they wanted as much help as they can get. Absent a process that is enterprise-wide, including policy, this does become supply chain's problem. It's a great question.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
so I'm going to run through these because I want to get, we're getting close on time. I want to get to the meat of this entire webinar.
Right, please do.
Business units fully aligned on strategy, performance and accountability metrics, we cover that. Results-driven protocols to drive performance, and next practices to sustain growth. Listen closely. If your organization does not practice these initiatives, you do not have a supplier diversity program. Fail-safe, from rhetoric to action. No contract shall be consummated without consideration of qualified minority, women, or veteran-owned sources. You're going to get all of these slides. These slides are the property of the council, and they are sharing them with all of the participants in this webinar. In the event candidates have not been identified, sufficient lead time must be extended to ensure the inclusion of qualified, diverse candidates. Now, what does that say? Does that say we have to give a contract to somebody who's diverse? Does it say that we're required to give a contract to a veteran or a woman or a minority? No. It means we have to provide a competitive opportunity. Absent this, there will always be an excuse why they are excluded. If we want to include, that's the word, inclusion, we must have a system, a protocol in place that requires inclusion. In the event candidates have not been identified, so there are, remember, I'm in supply chain for 37 years. There are many products for which there's one vendor worldwide. You're not going to find a minority or woman or veteran for everything you buy. But you need sufficient lead time to ensure the inclusion of qualified candidates where they exist. This is an absolute mandatory requirement for every member of this council. You should be ashamed to not have this in place. You should be ashamed to say you have a supplier diversity program if you don't require that you take a look at everybody before you make a decision. The vast majority of companies I run into, and it's utter nonsense, suggest that they can make supplier diversity work without this. You cannot work without examining those in the marketplace. That's number one. Let's go to the next one. Limited competition. A results-driven supply chain strategy that ensures competitive access for at-risk groups that continue to be highly underutilized in the pool. What am I saying? The essence of this strategy is this. The more you keep doing what you've been doing, the more you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. Where there is high underutilization and there's an abundance of capability in the marketplace, there is no excuse not to limit that competition to underutilized groups. And you'll never run into the reverse discrimination nonsense, because you will be including women. The most underutilized groups are women, minorities, and veterans, and LGBTQ companies. So this means that if you truly want to have a more manageable pool from which to select, and by the way, you do this without compromising on anything. So it's utter nonsense when you tell me, well, there's no one able to compete. If there's someone who's, how can you tell me you can't find a minority or a woman or veteran in maintenance services? I have companies saying that to me, to my face. I can't believe it. These are two fundamental strategies that tell me whether or not your company is serious about what it's doing. Next. Closing comments. There are 3 steps we must take if we really want to make lasting change and live up to what supplier diversity truly can be. First, we must conduct a business diversity and inclusion audit. Everybody thinks they're great until they have a third party, an independent, objective assessment of what they look like. In fact, the BDR does this for every member that seeks entry. You can't get into the BDR until they look over everything you're doing and say, well, you do or you don't qualify. They don't ask you to tell them whether you qualify. They do it. We must have an independent business diversity and inclusion audit. Second, we must execute results-driven protocols, not the rhetoric, oh, we want to include everybody. Show me how you're including everybody. These protocols will ensure performance, such as fail-safe. And all of this equals success stories that demonstrate value. Let me give you an example. At Delta, again, I keep using Delta as an example. We had a company called Aerojet. This was a Hispanic-owned company in aircraft engineering. They actually engineer and perform maintenance on JT-108 Pratt & Whitney engines. For years, they have had piecemeal work with us. We established these principles, and our business unit, not supplier diversity, the business unit took this company under their wings and collaborated with Pratt & Whitney and got their approval. And this company entered into a $250 million contract with Delta Airlines with no compromise on quality. Nobody's compromising on jet engines, trust me. So this is what happens when you employ these strategies. That's the kind of success stories. So far as I know, no other minority-owned firm in the industry had ever done that. We put together 3 units, the OEM, which was Pratt & Whitney, Delta Airlines business unit, and the Delta Airline and the supplier. They had been doing piecework. They had been doing spot work, but they did not have a long-term contract with us. That's the kind of success story that you create. That's the kind of change you can bring about.
Thank you, Reggie. And I think we're at the end of our time. We went over just a couple of minutes. So I want to thank all of our guest speakers, John Taylor at Medtronic, Hector Martinez, US Bank, Chris Collette, UnitedHealth Group, Sharon Patterson with BDR, and of course, Heather and her team at the North Central Minority Supplier Development Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Reggie, as well, and Allison, and everybody that joined. It shows the momentum is there, and we're going to work to keep it up, not let it go on the back burner.
That's right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you all. All right, again, we will send you the handouts and the slides if you so desire, and we'll send a short evaluation to everyone who has participated or registered for this webinar. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good.